योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिमानतोऽस्मि। लये सम्बोधयेच्चित्तं विक्षिप्तं शमयेत् पुनः सकाशायं विजानीयात् समप्राप्तं न चालयेत्। Om. So this part of the Yoga Sutra, the first four Yoga Sutras in the Yoga Sutra are very critical in our understanding the entire Yoga Darshana. So once we have deeply studied the first four sutras, the rest of the sutras pretty much follow a logic. So that's why we are spending a little more time than we have usually done in the previous iteration. There are four important concepts we have to, when we thoroughly understand. We have heard these words many times, but how much of in-depth knowledge is there about these words in the context of Yoga Darshana is very critical. And the four words are yoga, which is so popular and everybody talks about yoga, but then really very few truly understand what it means, yoga. And the second is chitta, and the third one is vritti, and the fourth one is nirodha. So if these four terms are properly understood, the essential nature of Yoga Darshana is completely understood. Because yoga, as soon as we talk about yoga, even many texts which are very popular also talk about yoking. In fact, from the whole tradition of the Yoga Darshana, it is actually Samadhi. So first misunderstanding about the word yoga is it is not yoking, it is not just you align the body with the asanas so that you align it with the mind and bring the mind to calm and then you have achieved a state of yoga, but actually it is Samadhi. So we'll talk about what exactly is the meaning of this Samadhi. Then, so we also saw last time that the chitta, the second term, the chitta is the individualized reflection of chit. Chit is the mind of Paramatma, of Ishvara, because you remember in Yoga Shastra, these terms are used, Ishvara and Purusha, Chit, all these things are used synonymously. So we have the Purusha or Paramatma or Ishvara. Ishvara also has a mind. And the mind of Ishvara is called Chit. And since Purusha, the individual person, is also a Purusha, this Purusha also has got a mind. But later on we are going to see in the Yoga Sutra that Ishvara is a Purusha Visheshaha. That is a special Purusha. So what is the difference between the individual Purusha and the special Purusha, and what is common to both? Common to both is both of them have the mind. But the difference is the mind of Parama Purusha or Ishvara is Chit, whereas in the Jivatma it is Chitta. So this difference is because in the Chit of Paramatma, when it is reflected in the mind of the individual, it becomes Chitta because it is associated with the Trigunas of Prakriti. So Prakriti is the intervening factor to introduce the Trigunas and contaminate the original Chit of Paramatma, when it is being individualized. Therefore, Chitta in Jivatma, actually it inheres the qualities of Chit, which is awareness, and also the influence of the Trigunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamagunas. It is something similar when you are making rasam. In rasam, you add two ingredients, let us say salt and the rasam powder. So both of them mix themselves and give a third kind of taste. It is not all salty, it is not all spicy. It's a blend of both. Similarly, the Chitta also is a blend of both Trigunas as well as the Chitta of the Jiva, of the Paramatma. So therefore, what is it that they introduce? Simultaneously, Sattva comes as what the text commentaries call as prakhya or illumination or perfect knowledge, and this perfect knowledge will get associated with the Rajas, and the Rajas is actually engagement with the world, with objects, and therefore it is a movement. So Rajas is movement, Sattva is revelation, perfect revelation, and Tamas is actually preservation, making sure that everything is stable. So again, Tamas is a much maligned word. Tamas at its best, it has no harmful effect at all. It is actually a very stabilizing entity. So this is the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. So a thing or a vastu that is actually described by the inner conscious organs of a individual, of a Jivatma, called the Antahkarana. This Antahkarana uses the Chit in association with the Trigunas and now becomes actually into its own parts. Buddhi, Manas and Ahankara. So when we look at the manifestation of Chit along with the Trigunas and becoming our emotive mind, Manas, Ahankara, the sense of individuality, I maker, and also when you look at the Buddhi, you can see the traces of all these gunas actually in all of these. Manas can be sankalpa, vikalpa. It may say, I want to do this, I don't want to do this. I am doing this, I don't care for it anymore. So sankalpa, vikalpa, atmakam manaha, nishchayatmika buddhi, it can happen. That is, buddhi can be a determining ability. Then the ahankara is something that is energized by the tamas. So all these three, this is how they manifest. But it is not so distinct. It is not like three distinct entities. But when they get mixed, then it becomes this rasam. Rasa, of course, it is all rasa only. It is an essence of our experience. And this rasa, what happens is changes the swabhava or the nature of Chitta as pure consciousness, Paramapurusha's Chitta as pure consciousness. It changes the swabhava or the characteristic of Chitta itself. So how does it change? In three ways. One is, whenever it comes into contact with objects, and these objects are called Vishaya, and contact and assumption of the Vishaya as mine, of the object as mine or of my interest, then immediately this is called as Vishaya Grahana. It's a technical term. So Vishaya Grahana is the Chitta becoming interested and making an object its own. It makes it as, it appropriates it as its own. Then as soon as the Vishaya Grahana takes place, the buddhi will start thinking along with the emotive mind. Manas and buddhi together will start thinking. This is technically called in Yoga Shastra as alochana. All this we have been using in popular talk, but popular conversation, but here it gains a special significance. Then what happens? The buddhi will actually do the nishchaya or determination. So Vishaya Grahana, Alochana and Nishchaya together in this mixture, just as salt, water and rasam and all these things change into one nomenclature called rasam. Similarly, Vishaya Grahana, Alochana and Nishchaya manifests as bhavana. Bhavana means thoughts. So we are now coming to bhavana. What are we going to with bhavana? What does bhavana, as soon as the bhavana or the thoughts arise, then fluctuations of the chitta takes place. Because chitta will now be looking at Vishaya, it will be looking at the thought, it will be looking at the determination, and constantly the object is in front, either physically or in the imagination of the thinker, and therefore the chitta goes on having fluctuations. And the characteristic of the chitta, because it is chitta and because it is in contact with the Vishaya, the problem is it develops a vritti. So this was a little bit of a gap we had to fill. Because if you look at the sutra, Ata Yoga Anushasanam Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodha. So between yoga, Anushasana in the teaching, after definition of yoga and after the definition of chitta, then we also had to introduce vritti. And now to control these vrittis, we need a nirodha or a controlling factor. And that's where the yoga practice comes. Yoga, chitta vritti, nirodha. That is, we must be very careful to see that nirodha is not an absence of vritti. So again, another big misunderstanding of Yoga Shastra is, I'm going to stop all the modifications of my mind. Please tell me, is it ever possible? It's impossible to stop the modification of the mind, the fluctuation of the mind. If anybody says that you have to stop the modifications of the mind, it is mano nasha, or killing the mind itself. And once the mind is killed, there is no individual. So is that the teaching of Patanjali? Absolutely not. What he means by chitta vritti nirodha is whenever a particular chitta vritti arises, and that chitta vritti is giving a klesha. So we have got to relate it to a later definition of Yoga Shastra, which we studied, of course, in the second chapter of avidya, asmita, ragadvesha, abhinivesha, when the kleshas arise. A yogi, whenever he sees that a particular chitta vritti is causing a affliction, it is creating ignorance, it is creating undue attachment, it is creating aversion, it is making us egoistic, or it is making us cling to things. We cling to things that we like and we cling to things that we don't like. This we have seen both in Bhagavata and in Ramayana. Kamsa could not spend even 1 second without thinking of Krishna. As soon as Ravana came to know about Rama, every second he has thought of Rama only. Of course, Kamsa and Ravana were thinking about them in hatred, dvesha. So therefore, the Chitta-vritti nirodha is applying a counter-vritti. To neutralize the movement is nirodha. So if we are driving and we come upon a stop sign or a red light, you are not going to switch off the car, isn't it? The car will be running. Only thing is you apply the brake. So what is applying the brake? The movement of the car is arrested so that we don't get into trouble in the traffic. So the ability of movement of the car should not be affected. Just because we say that stop sign is there and you completely disable the movement of the car, then the car is not available to you anymore. Similarly, the mind. So chitta-vritti nirodha is actually applying a counter chitta-vritti. For example, suppose there is anger and we recognize the anger is arising in our mind, then a yogi applies the counter neutralizing force, which is sneha or friendship and kshama and forgiving. So the whole concept of Yoga Shastra is every time we recognize a chitta vritti which is causing a klesha, to have in our arsenal a counter measure. So therefore chitta vritti nirodha has to be understood as the readiness to apply the counter vritti. It's not as easy as we say, because depending on the intensity of the emotion, how intense is the dominance of Vishaya, how deep is the alochana, and how efficient is the nischaya. Three factors, please remember. When these three combinations can also affect our ability to actually apply the counterpoint. So therefore, yogas chitta vritti nirodha is a constant contemplative activity, not just when we are sitting in meditation. Every minute of our life, as soon as we recognize a klesha, immediately we should be able to bring that counterpoint. So what does this...
One question, Ashwath, there.
Sure.
So we're talking about this ability to apply a counter vritti. One interesting thing was Patanjali didn't say manovritti nirodha, he said chitta vritti nirodha. So obviously he was not looking at the emotional aspects. So he was looking more from that. And second thing is that he was also talking about, later on he says that it is vritti sarupyam itaratva. Like he says this oneness getting carried away by the vritti is what he is saying, the normal status. And nirodha for him is not getting carried away. Drashta sarupe avasthanam, he says that you have to be as a way of witnessing it. So that ability, like you were mentioning, that ability, the rage that comes inside, if we can watch it, then we can apply a counter one.
Sure.
If we don't have the ability to watch it, there is no way we can apply a counter one.
Correct.
So that distancing needs to happen between the emotion and our own self. And somehow he seems to be implying that in this whole scheme of it is not as evident, but that ability to distance oneself and keep that gap seems to be there.
He will make it evident in the sutra Abhyasa Vairagya Abhyam Tannirodha. So by introducing that, he will teach us that by Abhyasa, see, when we start practicing in small things, like you are going on the freeway and somebody cuts you, then obviously there is an anxiety, there is an anger that wells up, and even if we don't go and attack that person, at least we will say, what kind of a person is who taught him, who gave him license, and so on and so forth. Even it is happening in our own mind, isn't it? So then those are the opportunities for controlling the applying the counterpoint. So then you say that, oh, poor fellow, maybe he has got a pregnant wife ready to deliver, so he is actually trying to rush to the hospital. Something like that, kshama, sneha, you just apply the counterpoint and then you become peaceful. So the whole question is that we have to become peaceful. So therefore, abhyasa vairagyabhyam nirodha comes later, but here chittavritti nirodha we have got to examine is because of the three factors of the chitta I talked about when chitta becomes individualized and the myriad combinations of the trigunas. So it is not just three colors, red, white and black, coming together. In fact, there are shades and shades and shades of each one of these colors. That is why as many people are there, so many different personalities are there. And those personalities also can be changed by knowingly or unknowingly doing Chittavritti Nirodha. Because a lot of people who may not know whatsoever about Yoga Shastra, all this logic, still life experience would have taught them to become patient, or would have taught them to become more accommodating, either because of the damage it could do if they didn't practice reticence, or it is because genuinely they change. But here what we are trying to do is to find out the why of things and where can we pinpoint this and how can we train our chitta to alert us of every bhavana before actually we jump into action. So that's the gap area that I am discussing. So now when the opposite, we'll try and then go on doing the Pratipaksha Bhavana. Later on he's going to talk about Pratipaksha Bhavana. That's why I introduced the definition of Bhavana. So what is Bhavana? Bhavana is a combination of three factors. Vishayagrahana, that is as knowing about the object we are engaged in. Secondly, what are the thoughts, alochana that come. And thirdly, what is the determination that we make, alochana, vishayagrahana and nischaya. These three together is bhavana. So Pratipaksha Bhavana that he is going to talk later also has these three components. Because the Vishayagrahana, the object which we have experienced, when the Chittavritti is not controlled, has got to be countered by another Bhavana which also has got three stages. And those three stages also must be countering. That is, I now look at an object with the likes and dislikes, that is Vishayagrahana. In Pratipaksha Bhavana, applying the opposite, the Vishayagrahana also changes its quality. Now it will start only looking at the Vishaya as just an object that is there. So this is how the Chitta Vritti Nirodha, we have to start working on that. For what purpose? The beauty of Chitta, if Chitta in association with Sattva, Rajas, Tamo gunas can become Chitta, by dissociation with the three gunas, Chitta can become Chit also. Isn't it? The reverse process is possible. So now we had Yoga Shastra now talks about what is this reverse process, and in the path of this reversing process, what will happen? So let us see. Let's make the Sattva Guna predominant. And we make the Sattva Guna predominant and balance the Rajoguna and Tamoguna. That means we become pure observers as far as the Vishaya is concerned. As far as the Alochana is concerned, we will look at this object and its uses. And the Nischaya, we will say that this is very useful. Let us say you look at a lump of gold. Vishaya Grahana, lump of gold, what can it do? It can actually give me wealth and convert it into a particular very attractive jewelry. Then Sattva, Rajas, Tamo Guna, among them Rajas and Sattva Guna at this moment are in balance. But now Yoga Shastra tells us that when Rajas and Sattva Guna are minimized and they are in balance and Sattva Guna predominant is there, Chitta looks for Siddhis and Aishwarya. Why is it a person is persuaded for power and wealth? And he acquires this power and wealth by right royal means, nothing criminal. He uses the system and goes after Siddhi, and then even here there is no yoga because the tamas has actually hidden the true nature of the person. And that is why you see that the higher and higher a person goes, the only way in which he can go like that is because of Sattva Guna. And once he reaches a particular level, and he starts losing the Sattva Guna because tamas still is there. And this Sattva Pradhana, when the pursuit of Aishwarya and Anima, the Siddhi, as we say, that is the various physical powers to become the lighter than the lightest Anima, heavier than the heaviest Garima, then bigger than the biggest Mahima, being able to get whatever you want, Praptihi, and you can desire whatever you want and acquire it, it is Prakamyam, lordship over anything, Ishitvam, being able to possess anyone, anywhere, even their minds, it is Vashitvam. This is called as the Ashtasiddhis, which we see even in the Hanuman Chalisa, Ashtasiddhi Navanidike Data. So what are these Ashtasiddhis? Anima, Mahima Chaiva, Garima, Lagima Tatha. Prapti Prakamya Mishitvam Vashitvam Cha Ashtasiddhayaha, says Amarakosha. So why does people go after Ashtasiddhi? It is because if the mere balancing of the Rajastamo Gunas is done, even if the Sattva Guna is predominant, it will end up in Vikshipta Avastha only. And then, only when the impurities of the tamas are actually neutralized. How do we neutralize the impurities of the tamas? What is the purpose of tamas? To maintain a stability. So, I will use tamas only for resting, sleep and rejuvenation of my energy. Other than that, throughout my wakeful life, I will not allow tamo guna to come up. Then what happens when only sattva rajas exists? Yoga Shastra says a person's mind turns towards dharma, vairagya and jnana. So how is it we are inspired towards and drawn towards dharma or detachment or drawn towards knowledge? It is because at this stage the person has made his tamo guna only a sthiti, maintenance and rejuvenating factor. So dharma, jnana. So let us say even rajoguna is also made into a total minimum. So what is Rajoguna? Rajoguna, I just, whenever during my wakeful life, I will use my energy for the sake of self-preservation, eating, going, dressing up and things like that, interacting with the people with friendliness, compassion, and so on and so forth. Then only Sattva Guna is completely predominant. Then the person will be established in one's own Swarupa. So the Chitta becomes established in one's own Swarupa. That is why they say Chitta Vritti Nirodha is the highest mental power. In the Mahabharata, there is a beautiful shloka which says, Nasti yoga samam jnanam, nasti sankhya samam jnanam, nasti yoga samam balam, nasti sankhya samam jnanam, nasti yoga samam balam. In the Shanti Parva of Mahabharata, Vedavyasa writes this. So, simple practical method is to draw a line for ourselves and say, I will never cross this line. We'll call it as Lakshman Rekha. So once we place that boundary, and within that boundary, Dharma, Jnana, Vairagya is actually applied, then Chitta Vritti Nirodha becomes easy. Suppose that line was not there, or the line is a moving line, then what happens? Even the most intelligent mind will believe that a golden deer exists. Is there anybody more bright than Sita? Look at the Vikshipta mind there. Number one, she believes that there is a golden deer. Number two, after hearing the Ha Sita, Ha Lakshmana, when Rama shouts, she believes that Rama is in trouble. She forgets what was Rama's prowess. Yasya bibhyati devascha jataroshascha samyuge. Ramayana says, even gods tremble if Rama gets angry with them. That means in the three worlds there is nobody who can actually trouble Rama. And Sita believes. Then she tells Lakshmana, you go and bring Rama back. And when he says, Mother, how can there be a golden deer? This is the work of a Rakshasa. Then how can you say that Rama can be attacked and killed by anybody? Then she doubts his character. So now you please apply Vishayagrahana, Alochana and Nishchaya. In the mind of the Vikshipta state of Sita, what was the quality of her bhavana? And that's why in Ramayana, he dramatizes by saying, the best of the people, if they do not know the Lakshmana Rekha, the most eminent of them can fall. So Yoga Shastra alerts us much in advance, saying that develop this strategy. And by developing the strategy, make sure that the dukkha that can come in future is dealt with now. Later on, we are going to see another sutra in Yoga Shastra itself, Heyam Dukkham Anagatam. Anagatam Dukkham Heyam. The dukkha that has not yet come must be dealt with now. It's not like I will cross the bridge when we come to it. We must know what if the bridge is icy. have full gas tank. Dumbarton Bridge, anyone who travels on Dumbarton Bridge in peak hour in San Francisco Bay Area know what it is. Just 1.5 miles. You could be sitting there for 3 hours. So therefore, Heyam Dukkam Anagatam. Expect that you may be, today may be the day where you sit on Dumbarton Bridge for 3 hours. Have a full tank of gas. If that is there, no anxiety. You will sit there and actually listen to some music and relax. There is a beautiful story. This is a Tibetan, of Tibetan origin. It's a folk tale from Tibet. So it seems once upon a time there was a Tibetan prince. And this Tibetan prince, he was given a name translated from the Tibetan language. He who enjoys well-being is the translation of that name. And here our prince was the only son, very charming, very learned, very generous, extremely intelligent. He was loved by the entire country. Similar to Rama. If you look at Ramayana, the whole citizenry were absolutely loved immensely Rama. And when Dasharatha was contemplating to coronate him, the most joyous, except Manthara, everybody, including Kaikeyi, were all extremely happy that Rama is being coronated. That means there was nobody who did not like Rama. Like that, there was nobody who did not like our hero, this prince, the only son, extremely charming, very learned, a great leader, intelligent and generous. So one day what happened, he was in the court and somebody came from the blue. In a royal court, a lot of people keep coming. In your office, a lot of people come. They will come to sell things. They will come to ask you for something. So it's a revolving door. They keep coming and going. But if the Chittavritti Nirodha is not there, then everyone who can come or everyone who leaves can affect our mind, depending on what kind of a glib talk the other person does. So this person who visited, he said, in the deep mountains of the Himalayas, in an isolated place, there are 7 brother magicians. It is the most inaccessible region of the Himalayas, but they have extraordinary magical powers. And they guard these powers very, very carefully. It's not possible to get it out of them. So you just imagine, why is this? It is because if those such magical powers were shared, then Loka Kalyana will be affected, and these magicians were using their magical powers only for the sake of Loka Sangraha. And therefore, who gets those powers is very important. So we have this prince suddenly gets an intense desire to learn the secret of these magicians. So he changes himself into an ordinary pilgrim's cloth, because he cannot be identified as the prince. And then he changes all the clothing and wears some rags, and then dresses himself as a monk, as a Buddhist monk. Tibet is a Buddhist monk. And he goes on journeying. 7 months he journeys. So all this is 7, the number 7. So again, it is Panchajnanendriyas, and then Manas and Buddhi. That's the metaphor there. So 7 months he will be traveling. Very tired, travel weary, and he asks everybody on the way, have you seen these 7 magicians, where they live? They all, some people who know, they that they don't know, they say they don't know. Some people who don't know, they feign that they know and then send him in wrong ways. So after much travel, finally he suddenly comes to the top of a hill and he finds that there was a solitary house in the valley below. So with great excitement, our prince goes there and then finds that there is nobody in the house. But he has traveled so much, so he sits there and he says, I'll wait for the householders to come back to ask them, and then he falls asleep. So he falls asleep, and when the sun set, these 7 brothers came on their 7 horses, and they find our prince sleeping on their porch. So immediately they wake him up and say, get out of here, why are you here? Then our prince pleads with them, I have done so much of travel. I am on my way to go to Kailasa. Look at that. He has come there to see them. But when they said, get out of here, he immediately says, I am on the way to Kailasa, I am very tired and I am not feeling very well. Can I take rest? Then immediately the 7 magicians become compassionate and then they say, oh, you are very tired. Here is some food. You eat food. We will let you be here for 7 days and 7 nights. You can rest for 7 days and 7 nights, and after that you have got to leave and go on your way. He says, agreed. Now, throughout the daytime, these 7 people have gone. And he is waiting to see when do they practice their magic. So by the time they come, of course they provided him food and all that. And by the time they come, he is so exhausted he sleeps off. Thus 6 nights he slept off. And he did not even know when the magicians came back. In the morning when he wakes up, he only sees the 7 horses back, the back of the 7 horses, because they are going away. So 7th day morning he determines, I am going to stay, 6th night he decides, I am going to stay awake today and then I am going to see what they are doing. So with great difficulty he stays awake, and they had a window, and in that window he sees light. And he looks up and finds that the window did not have any door. That's how the light came through. So he stealthily climbs up and then he peeks inside the window and he finds these 7 magicians practicing their magic, and they had all their books all around. And then stealthily comes down when daybreak comes. And when the 7 brothers had left, magicians had left, he climbs back into that window, enters into their hall, and then remember, he is very intelligent, so he reads all those materials. He had already watched them the practice of magic. And then he absorbs everything in one reading. But he gets totally absorbed in his reading, he loses the sense of time. And he doesn't even hear the return of the magicians. And as soon as they come, they become very, very angry. We are your hosts, we have given you food and shelter, and you come and steal all our knowledge. And they try to attack him. By that time, our hero has learned all the tricks. So he jumps out of the window, nothing happens to him obviously, and then turns himself into one of the horses. Exactly. A white, beautiful horse. The 7 horses note that there is an 8th horse. So the horses get panicky and they start galloping. So our hero, who is also in the form of a horse, mingles with them and tries to run away from the pursuing magicians. So the magicians also change into a fast steed and they start following again. They come upon a river. In this river, our hero jumps into the river and changes himself into a fish and mixes with a school of fish. And immediately they change into a seagull and want to scoop down and then catch this fish. And he suddenly becomes an eagle. And then he starts flying away. And the magicians also turn into an eagle and they start pursuing. And our hero enters into a cave. And there was a great yogi who was actually meditating. He was completely absorbed in dhyana. And he goes there and then hides behind this sadhu. And these eagles also follow him. And immediately he changes himself into an ant and joins a colony of ants that were actually crawling. So immediately the 7 brothers change themselves into 7 hens and start pecking at the ants and to want to eat. Quickly, the prince morphs himself into a human form, grabs a knife that was there and cuts off the throats of all the 7 brothers. Blood starts flowing. That is when, for our prince, the remorse hit. What have I done? So you can see that chitta vritti, how whenever a Vishaya Grahana takes place, the best training, the best heritage, all the advantages and benefits that a prince can get, all of them were forgotten. It is because, again, this is a story for your analysis. At each one of these changes, what was the bhavana that was going on? What was the bhavana in the mind of the prince? And what was the bhavana in the minds of the 7 magicians? And then he is so overcome by grief, he prostrates before the Guru and say, how can I atone for what I have done? And of course, the story continues as to how he did. But here, I just related this story to you to indicate that the modification of the mind even by Pratipaksha Bhavana is not easy. Because as long as Aishwarya and Anima, the Siddhis, power becomes one of interest. In the beginning, it is good to have that kind of ambition. But then the Lakshmana Rekha has got to be drawn. If the Lakshmana Rekha is not drawn, then lot of people will get hurt. So therefore, this whole idea is when the possibility of vikshipta state is there, and therefore when the chitta has to remove the impurities of tamas, that's the whole idea. There is nothing wrong in our prince seeking the the various siddhis of those 7 magicians. Why did he not go in the very first place, prostrate before them and say, please accept me as your student? And be ready for whatever test this teacher would give. Because even they would be interested in continuing and then transmitting their knowledge to the next generation. He could have done that. He could have done tapas. Just contrast this to what Parvati's tapas was. How did Parvati do tapas for Shiva? First, she gives his physical help, physical service every day. She would take flowers, she would take fruits. She would bring water for his daily oblations. All those things she was doing. And then she shows her love for Shiva, and after that she stops eating for him, completely does upavasa, and then she even becomes, she starts eating only leaves, and later on she even gives up giving up leaves and gets the name Aparna. So she gets Shiva as her husband. Why did not our prince do the same thing in learning these skills? It is because of the chitta vritti, in which the tamas still has impurity. So we call it as tamo mala in Yoga Shastra. So when the chitta can remove this tamo mala, then the moha will disappear. The clinging, the attachment and the clinging gets removed. So it has to, the chitta vritti nirodha has to work at the tamas level and discover all the impurities. So how can we do this? The theory sounds good, but let us look at practically what I can do. Project number one. To remove the impurities of the tamo mala, our sages have given Dharma Shastra. So the first source for us is Dharma Shastra. That is why you remember we studied Vidaraniti. So to remove the tamo mala, now may be a good opportunity to go back to Vidaraniti and then classify the entire teaching into different columns. Column number one, in Viduraniti, what are the impurities that Vidura identifies? They're scattered all over the text. So first reading of Viduraniti, to just identify the tamo mala or the impurities. Then the second reading, it is to finding the counterpoints, column number 2. And in another reading, finding the pure acts and attitudes. Of course, you can do that simultaneously. Even in one reading, while you are reading, you can have these 4 columns and then classify the text and then having a practice of applying this in daily life. Over a period of time, the tamo mala will actually get neutralized. This is tapas, this is dhyana, this is abhyasa. And then we go to address rajas. So how to address the mala of rajas? This is where meditation comes, dhyana. We already are doing Shastra Abhyasa, we increase the Shastra Abhyasa, and then use some of our energies for Loka Sangraha. It is only when we come into contact with the world, we understand that my challenges and my miseries are not unique to me. Everywhere people are challenged, suffering. Then we also get Vairagya. Project number 2. Then what happens is this slowly dissolves the negative effects of Rajoguna. Then what happens? The Sattva Guna starts increasing. Rajoguna's proportion, Tamoguna's proportion comes down. Then reality, which was hidden by tamas, will start flowing through in the chitta. This is where the Shastrabhyasa, then the practice, then actually the counterpoints, all of these things will slowly start working. And the Sattva Guna goes on increasing. The Purusha and the sentient being and the Swarupa of the Purusha, which is Chiti, our own Chitta, which is contaminated. What we have done is we have filtered out and separated the Chit from the Rajastamo Gunas. Then in that Chit, the Swarupa reflects. So this is Tadadrashta Swarupe Avasthanam Vritti Saropyam Itaratra is explained by the story of the prince. We'll see more in our next class. Thank you.